Tonight we're going to talk about the mean stack. It just seems so mean to have the word mean up there. It's so cool. Okay. So what is the mean stack? So it's basically a complete JavaScript-based application stack built using MongoDB, Express, AngularJS, and Node.js. So MongoDB is basically going to be your NoSQL database server, and it's going to provide direct integration with Node.js either through the native MongoDB client or Mongoose. And I'm actually going to show you using Mongoose tonight because it builds a really nice resource-ready API that you can actually take and use the ng resource from AngularJS and actually interact CRUD-wise. And I'm all about taking the easy way out. I am a lazy developer, and if there's something I don't have to do, you know, I'm always looking for that. So we'll use Mongoose. If you want to see how to do stuff using the native client, there's the book Learning Node. I'm trying to think of it. It actually has a whole chapter on using the native MongoDB client under Node.js. Also, the class that we were talking about at 10gen, they start you out using the native Mongo client. So for the first couple of weeks, you're just using the native Mongo client, and then they get in and they actually switch over to Mongoose. So Express is basically a back-end framework for Node.js. It's the best way. To me, it's kind of, if you're an ASP.NET developer or a Ruby on Rails developer, this is kind of your framework here. It's going to sit on top of Node.js and use the low-level Node.js communications and stuff, and it's going to basically provide you libraries for specifying routes. How when somebody enters slash clients or slash clients and a number to equal a client ID, you use Express to tell it how to route that call and then how to handle it. They have several different HTML templating libraries. So if you're familiar with like ASP.NET, where in the ASP.NET backend page, you'd put in your text and come back, or the like there's the J template, there's Swig, there's several different templating libraries that you can use and take your data from Mongo and populate it in your web page before it ever gets served to your Angular app. It handles SSL. It handles your authentication for you. There's things that all your error handling, logging. Matter of fact, there is, and I'll pull up another project. A couple guys actually did a mean example app that actually does all the OAuth stuff, so that you can either authenticate via Twitter or Facebook or Google Plus in your app. But Express is going to basically handle all your back-end, middleware and your logic for a lot of the low-level things that you don't want to write. And then you've got Angular, which you're going to use for your client-side framework. So Angular on the client will handle requesting data from the server, sending data back to the server, displaying and rendering stuff for you. Your two-way dynamic binding. Dependency injection. I'm sure everybody's used to Angular in one form or another. So, a lot of my examples before this was we just basically had a static app that did a lot of processing, and then I'd always send something to like mongolabs.com and and interact with them and just do all the basic CRUD operations against MongoLabs. So we're really a two-tier. The mean stack is going to allow you to do a multiple tier type of setup. And then we got Node, which is basically your server framework that's written in JavaScript. It runs on Google's V8 engine, and it provides the core server functionality. So it handles your HTTP request, your HTTPS request. The first thing they start you out is it's a very asynchronous programming model. So every request you got, you're going to basically pass in some type of callback in order to process that once it comes back. It also is single-threaded, so it's a little bit different than if you're used to working, in a multi-threaded environment. Everything's on a single thread, but its asynchronous nature allows it to scale quite well and handle multiple people. And the big thing is there's tons of libraries. What you're going to see me do here as we start up, all this stuff are libraries that are that Node runs. So there are different Node modules that you're going to compile together to build your server app. And so like Express is actually a Node module or a Node library. When we get into the Mongo client, it's another library. So, and this is the typical application architecture. Like I said, on the top there, is your web browser with AngularJS in it, and then it communicates back to the server, and it's going to be talking to Express via Node, and then Express is going to be talking to MongoDB, either via Mongoose or using the native MongoDB driver. So what kind of tools are we going to need? So first of all, everything we're going to do is going to be on top of Node.js. So the first thing you're going to have installed is Node.js. So, and I've basically, you would go out, and the way you'd set up your environment is you'd go out to nodejs.org, download the installer for your OS, and I will share all these, so they'll be out there in the links, so you guys will be able to pull that down. And then we're going to use Bower to actually pull down the JavaScript libraries that we're going to use on our Angular app. Yeoman, we're going to use that for the generator for the Angular app. Now, Yeoman actually has an Angular generator, it has an Express generator, it also has Mongoose generators and scaffolding. Problem is they don't have one that does all three together. So what you end up having to do is pick the one that you're going to use the most and use that, and then hand code the other stuff, or use another project that would generate it and bring over your files that way. I've never had luck trying to run two different generators in the same directory. Mainly because the Express generator is going to want to put like your static content, which would be your Angular site, in public, because that's the Express convention. And Angular generator is going to want to put all your Angular stuff in the app directory and underneath it. And so you kind of run into these problems. Now, what I did is I went ahead and used the generated the Angular stuff because that was the core, and then used Express and actually used the static module to actually serve out our Angular data for us. We'll use Grunt. So you do npm install, and I don't know if anybody knows what npm is, but that's the Node Package Manager. It comes with Node.js, and that is actually how you get libraries for your application. As you type npm install, if you do -g, it'll go into your global cache, and it'll be available across all your projects via the Node command line. If you don't have the -g, it'll just go into your project directory, and so it'll only be available there. So we'll use Grunt to do some build tasks, and then we'll use the AngularJS generator, which is generator-angular. Okay. And then, like I said, there's no good all-around mean generator for Yeoman. So, like I said, select the generator you're most familiar with, or that you're going to use for the bulk of your project, and use it. And then hand code the rest as needed. And like I said, we're using AngularJS generator. Oh, now we're into code. Hey, all that pain and trouble to get this guy to display. All right. So let me bring up WebStorm, and so this is my little test app here that I was showing you a little bit earlier, and what I'd like to do is I'm gonna bring up another terminal window here, and we're gonna start off with. Well, let's see if I can do that. Was it Control Plus? Nope. Okay, so I'm going to jump into my WebStorm projects, and I'm just going to create a sample project real quick here. So we start off by creating a empty subdirectory, and then we'll jump into that subdirectory. And then what I'm going to do to start with is, now I've already installed Yeoman and that, but what you would normally do is we'd go ahead and we'd do install -g, let's say Bower. You'll see it'll go through here now. Let's see what we got here. Oh, I got, yeah, thank you. Because I'm on, I've got to use sudo -g. That way it can handle my global. So you'll see it'll start pulling files down and start updating everything. So that was Bower that we did. Okay, and then we'll go ahead and we'll do, now if I want to do multiple things at once, I can do yo space like grunt -cli space generator -angular, and that will basically install all 4 of those. It'll go pull them all, or all 3 of them, pull them down for you. Now again, those were all with the -g, so it's going in my global node cache instead of my local directory. So if we actually do an ls here, I still have nothing in my directory. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the Angular generator. So we're going to say yo Angular, and I'm just going to go ahead and hit enter. And what this is going to do is this is going to start the generator, and it's going to actually build. It's going to ask me some questions like, do I want to use Twitter Bootstrap? I'll say yes. Do I want to use Compass, which I don't know anything about it because I haven't learned it, and so we'll say no. And then which modules would you like to include? So I'm going to basically make sure that all 3 modules are included: resource, cookies, and sanitize. We're going to use the resource module as we move along. And then he starts pulling stuff down. So he's going out and he's generating the code, and he's pulling down all the modules that we need. So he's pulling down all the Grunt modules for the build task, because the Angular generator will actually use Karma to do your unit test. It'll actually use ngmin so you don't have to worry about wrapping all your stuff in the square brackets or do the inject on everything. It'll also consolidate and minify all your code as well. So now if I do ls, you'll see that we've now got, you know, an app directory, and we've got several different files. And then so let's go ahead and we'll switch over here real quick, and I'll let's go ahead and we'll open that directory just so you can see what it looks like here. Oh, come on, go away. I hate when it does that. Was it app test we call it, or was it just test? Oh, sample. Yeah, okay. So let me choose that, and oh, yeah, disconnected. Okay. So we have a test directory which is all the specs for your controller. So as it creates controllers, it'll create test files down here. Let's see if I can make this guy bigger. Let's see. Let's see a zoom. Let's see. That just sucks. Let's see here. No. Let's see if I can't make that window bigger. No, but I have no idea.
You want to just override your fonts? Is that...
Well, that's why I was figuring I could do my fonts here, but it doesn't seem to. The only fonts we have there. Let's see. Is this? Yeah. Anyway, so basically the app folder is where your Angular app is stored, okay? And so you'll have a Bower components that will have all your Angular, all the libraries that you pull in. And in Bower, which let me switch back over here. I don't know how many people have used Bower before, but if you go to bower.io, it's basically a package manager for your web applications. And it's a lot like NPN. But it's really what they're doing is it's for your client side Java. So it puts everything in Bower components, and it's just the stuff that you actually need for your app. So like, you know, you'll see that there's an AngularJS and an AngularMin.js, and then they also have Bower.json, which is basically the Bower file for the version and the dependencies that it needs. So that has an images folder, and it has your scripts, which is going to be your, like in this case here, it leaves you with the main controller. And then you actually have a view that, you have your main view, which is just a very basic view. So if I was to come over here and just type grunt server, this is going to actually start building everything, and it'll kick it off, and we're on our website. So as I make changes back here, so if I was, if I change this from enjoy coding Yeoman and I say the mean stack, let's say, and we save that, it's automatically going to reload, and you'll see that it changed it, enjoy coding from the mean stack. So it has a watcher, and it'll auto reload your app for you automatically. And like I said, this generator is basic for AngularJS. If we come back over here and let's say that I want to create a new route called client, you'd say yo Angular :route and then client. And what it's going to do is it's going to actually create a new client.js in the controllers. It's going to create a new test harness for the controller. It's going to create a new HTML partial for you, and then it's going to update your index.js. So if we actually go out here and look, so here's like my controller for the client controller, and here's the new HTML, and then here's your spec for your client controller. So it generates that automatically for you. And then the other thing it does is in the app.js, it adds the when clause for you. When I get /client, this is the template URL, and here's the controller that I want to invoke for that. So it's based on, instead of hard coding your controllers into your HTML fragments or your partials, it's basically using the template URL and the controller parameters of the route engine to hook those up at runtime. So you can reuse your partials. So you can have one client partial that you use for edit, update, delete, and whatnot. Now, again, everything here is actually in the app directory. So that's your entire app. Now and then we have our Grunt file here for basically all the Grunt tasks for building, for dev, test, and distribution. They provide you with your Karma configurations for your unit tests. They also have your end-to-end configuration here. And then you also have a package.json, which is, here's everything that when I type npm install, I need the Node Package Manager to pull down for me. So it's pulling a bunch of contributor libraries from Grunt down, as well as a bunch of Karma libraries. And then we also have I think it's the Bower JSON here that it creates. And this is going to be your dependencies and then your dev dependencies down here. So our project is actually dependent on these guys here: Angular, JSON3, jQuery, the Angular resource. And then from a development perspective, we have stuff that's dependent on Angular mocks, Angular scenario. So it kind of wraps all that stuff for you. Now, to add Express to this, we need to create some other directories, and we actually need to create a couple other things. So let me go back to our recent project here. And so the first thing I did was I added an API folder. Now this is not conventional for Express. This is Jim Lavin when he's looking for a back-end API. I always do everything under the API folder. So what I did here is so this is my Mongoose definition for my client API for the normal. Give me a list of clients, get me a single client, create a client, update, delete. We'll go over that a little bit more here. And And then there's a models folder here. And this actually is what Mongoose uses to define the models that are going to go into the database and then send stuff back and forth. And you can define things like what's required when you create it, whether it's a particular type. You can even provide methods for auto-generating types.
Did it generate all that for you?
No, I actually had to hand code this. So these are the things that I'm hand coding. This is what I'm saying. The problem is what would really be nice is, and I'm sure somebody will do it soon, is to have a mean generator that will take and create your Angular your Angular files, your Mongoose files, and your Express files. Because what I did here is we're going to use this scrum.js all over the place, right? And these are the routes that we use in Express for the different things, for like get all the clients, post a client to create one. So you notice it's all clients or clients : client ID. And we'll either do based on the type, whether it's get, put, delete, or post, we're either doing a create, an update, or a delete. And we'll get into this a little bit more.
So the generators for each, like the generator for Express, the generator for Angular, and they don't cooperate very well?
No, matter of fact, let's go back to my sample over here, okay? So let's do this, npm install. I think there's a generator -express. Let me do it in, I'm going to have to do sudo here because I want to.
I think Express, the CLI for Express comes out of the box with the...
It does.
Just like
and it puts everything in public. It puts all your static stuff in public, and then it creates a route folder and stuff like that too. So you can do it that way as well.
Yeah, it's not great for a spot.
Yeah. So let's go ahead and get that, and then what we'll try here is I don't even know how to use this. Let me go find it real quick. Yeoman, and then let's go look at the community generators here and Express. Okay, here we go. So basically it's like Yo Express, right? So if I was to go in here and now type Yo Express, he's going to start writing other stuff, right? Do you want basic or MVC? So we'll leave it as basic. And then it wants to know if I want to override it. Yes, no. We'll just say yes. And then now it wants to know if I can, I guess I can say A for always.
Why does it care about PowerRC?
Well, because it's pulling it down as well. It has Bower packages that it pulls for that. So now if we do ls, you'll see that I have an app.js here. I have my app directory, but I also have a public directory here. Here, let's bring up the Finder. Now this one I should be able to make big, shouldn't I? Okay. Where are we at? That was going to be in my WebStorm project sample. Okay, guys. How do we make this thing big? Window, zoom, there we go. Oh, that isn't what I want. Where's just a simple, easy... So my Windows, I can like hold Control and press plus and it blows the screen up, but I guess it's not here.
Depending if you have like accessibility options set.
Yeah, and I don't.
You can hold Control and then zoom in, like scroll up rather, and it'll zoom in on the screen.
Yeah, he's not. I guess I don't have it because I never thought about it. So so what it did was it created the public, which is going to be what your static app, your static content is going to be in. And you'll see here under your JS, there's nothing here right now. There's nothing here under your image. Nothing under. So there's nothing really in these folders at all other than a style sheet for your web page. And it also created the routes folder, which is going to have your your default index route and your default user route. And then under views, it's going to create a Jade template. So it defaults to using the Jade templating engine. So you got index.jade and layout.jade. So if I go back over here and let's reopen that. So if we bring up like index.jade, it's a very basic, I don't know how many people have used the Jade templating engine, but it's a very terse syntax. And when it sees that, it will actually, that's its way to do binding for you. Then you notice it extends layout. So what it's going to do is it's going to take this layout.jade and it's going to say, okay, wherever you see block content, then that's where it's going to instick the Jades or the index stuff underneath that. So it'll be there. So it basically sees this and says, okay, that's where I've got to put my stuff here. But see, it also has a link for your style sheet and a link for your live reload script. And as you add more stuff, you put in more script tags in that. So it's a much more terse way of writing HTML. And if we look at the routes here, this is the index route. So it basically, you export the method index, and then he's going to basically render the index template with the title express. And then we also have a user one here where he's going to respond. It's basically just a sample, respond with a resource. But it also created this app.js here where it basically pulls in all the require stuff that it's going to have for the core of the app. So this is actually what you give to Node to launch. So, and for people who haven't used Node yet, the require basically is how you load a Node module into your code so you can use it. And you assign it to a variable. And then you can then go express, you can do like express.fav icon, like down here. So the fact that we loaded express here now makes it available to my code here, and I can say, okay, I want you to use this other module, the fav icon module, wherever you see app.use. So normally what you'll do is you'll create we'll go back to my other one, but so it goes through and it walks through everything here and creates up your configuration for your logger, your body parser, your method overrides, and then he basically goes on and starts up the server and listens on a port. So now we'll go back to what we were using here. So they don't quite play well together.
Yeah, the better question was the Mongoose generator.
Yeah. Well, and I haven't used the Mongoose generator, so I did everything by hand as far as everything that was around the Express. But well, you do a little bit better. So this is my default Node app. So this is what I'm going to use to bootstrap the whole app. And you always have to have some either app.js or Node, or I call it Node-app because I also have an app.js in my app directory. But so we're going to load up the Express module, and then we're going to get a reference to the app. And then we're going to also load up the Mongoose module and get a reference to that. And then the first thing we're going to do is, because we actually have to connect to our database before we start setting up Mongoose, I'm going to go ahead and do a mongoose.connect, and I'm basically, this is going to get to my local version of MongoDB, and it's going to go against the Scrum database in MongoDB. And the MongoDB here is basically going to put it on that 27051 or whatever the port is, the default port for MongoDB is. And then I'm going to use, and since this is a very basic app, I'm only going to use a couple things. I'm going to use the body parser so that when the ng resource sends an object to the backend, we can parse it and we'll actually get an object back that's valid. And then I'm also going to use the static portion of Express and tell it to serve all static files out of /app. So it's going to go here basically on my app, and it will serve all the static content. So if it doesn't find a route, then it'll go look in the app directory and try to find the file. So I'm keeping my Angular app pretty much as basic as possible, using and The other thing is trying to teach you guys also, or cover the templating engine and Express and Mongoose and everything. I get pretty. So then I'm going to bootstrap my model, and this is one of the things. So Mongoose, what you do to define your collections and everything is you define models for your collections. And when you define that model and then you actually compile the model, then it's going to give you back an interface that will allow you to do like a save, a delete, an update, and a query. So if we go to models.scrum, kind of go look at our model. So this is it will invoke this module. So it'll basically load this up and launch it off, and the first thing it does is it loads Mongoose up. And then it gets the schema object from Mongoose, and we're going to use that to basically compile our schema and define it. So in this case here, I have a nested class that is basically going to, the first object's going to have client name, and it's going to be a string, and it's going to be required. And then that object is going to have an array, and if you notice my little square brackets here, of projects. So I've basically defined my project collection here. And every project is going to have a project name that's going to be a string and is required. And every project is going to have an array of stories. And a story is going to have a title, which also is a string and is required. And then it's going to have an array of tasks, which has a title, the number of story points, 1 through whatever your number is, who it's assigned to. You have an ordering schema like 0 through 20 or whatever, and then a status that's going to be a string. So that's kind of my data model. So what that should actually do is we can actually take this and we can, let's see here. Well, we'll build one here in a little bit. It's just going to basically be an object with a nested class. So if I was to go down here, that's going to define this as this guy here. So we have client name, Jim, projects, and that would be an array, and we'd have project name, and then he'd have his stories here. I can't spell project, can I? And that's going to be another array, and so we come underneath. Oh. So then we have our title, first story or whatever it's going to be. Well, let's say login user, and then he'd have basically underneath that an array of tasks. That would then be our first task, which would be title, let's say login screen, points, maybe 2. And it would go on and on and on down the thing. So that's basically what we're defining here with our schema up here. It's just a nested object with other objects in it. And then the other thing we're going to do is we're going to basically provide an additional method on this schema or on this model that is going to have a load method. So we could do scrum.load, pass it an ID and a callback function, and it's going to basically call MongoDB's find one and pass in the ID. So it will go find the object with that ID and then execute the callback with that. and then we're gonna basically execute the model and get an object called Scrum. So what it does is it goes through here and compiles all this up, does all the validation for you and everything, and gives you that back. So that's the first thing it goes through. Then we have on our Node app is we're going to basically set up our routes. So we're going to use another module that is going to basically take and define the routes that we're going to use for this API, and that's in routes.scrum right here. And so what the first thing it does is says, okay, I need your API, and well, he actually brings in the async module first, and then we're going to module.exports is how you basically can return back a method on your module that you can then call. And if we actually when we look at the scrum.api here, you'll see that we have like exports.client, so then you can basically do module.client and you have a method. So that's kind of how you define a module in Node.js. So this API is going to basically, again, require Mongoose, the async, and then he's also going to pull in our model that we just created, the Scrum model that we did over here in this guy here. So he's going to bring that in. And then he's also going to bring in the underscore library so we can do things like extend and find. And then he defines, like, let's find a client by ID. So he's going to use scrum.load, that method that we defined in the last model over here. He's going to basically call this method here. And then once the callback is, he'll either check for an error, and if he didn't get a client, he'll send back an error. Otherwise, he's going to basically return back the client and then call next in the pipeline. And then with create, it's pretty much the same thing. He's going to create a new Scrum object, and he's going to use the request body. That's what the REQ is that's getting passed. This is your request, and then this is your response objects. He's going to basically take that request body and create a new client, and then call save on it, and then you've got your handler function here that basically that once it's done persisting the object to the database, he'll come back here and he'll call it, and if there's an error, then he'll send back an error. Otherwise, he's going to send back the client as a JSON-P object. And that's what happens here if it's successful. And then with the update, it's pretty much the same. We're basically getting our .client from the request, and then we're using underscore to extend that with the request body. So what this is going to do is it's going to take your existing client, right, and then he's going to go through and he's going to add everything on that was in the request body for the object that you sent back, and that'll overwrite the old data. And then we'll call client.save, and then just return back the client as a JSON response. And then to delete a client, we use the destroy method. And again, he's basically getting the client from the request, and they're calling remove on it, and they'll either get an error or a response. And then .show is going to basically just return back the request client. Now on all, he's basically going to bring back all the stuff in the collection and return back the array of clients that comes back. So those methods are defined here, and then basically the routes is saying, okay, whenever I get a method that's a get method for clients with nothing after it, and it's actually a get request, then I want you to call clients.all against our Scrum API, which would then turn around and call this guy down here in the bottom, which is going to basically just do the find query and return back all the clients from the database. And then whenever I get a post request to the client's URL, then I want you to call clients create, and that's where he's going to create the object. In the same way with the get, Now, the thing that's different between get, put, and delete is that we're also passing along the client ID. And so it expects to, with the get, it's going to have a client ID on the end of it, and then it'll basically use that to do the load of the single user or the single object, and then return it back. And then with the put, they use that to load up that object to pass. You remember how we were in here and we had the update and the destroy, and it had request.client. So what it's doing is it actually is going in here and grabbing that request based on the client ID and sticking that on the request as part of it as well. And then we've got our so that's your get. This is your put. So that would be your update, and then your delete, app.del for delete. And it'll call your destroy method. And then this parameter, he basically is sets up the client ID parameter for you automatically at the end of this. So he does the app param. And that's just the basis for that API. Is those three files. You have your route file, you have your model, and you have your API. And then you could replicate that over and over and over for any type of CRUD backend that you want. Now, if you want to get into more and more, what do we say, a lot more heavy-duty business stuff, then you could basically add in more stuff on top of that. What I was going to do is I just started up the debugger here, and we'll set some breakpoints in here so you guys can kind of see how this kind of goes together. So let's we'll do the client and the create, update. I'll do delete. Where is it? So I should have over here, as he's telling me, I've got the Express server on port 3000. So if we come back over here, now I know there was a way to zoom this up. Anyway, so we'll create a new client, and I'll come in here and we'll 02, and we'll hit save, and then it basically drops me right into the debugger in WebStorm. And so we've got this nice little blue line here, and then you can basically it's like F8 to step over, F7 to step into. What is that? Control Shift F7 to force it, and then step out. So I mean, we can like walk through here, and I'm going to set a breakpoint inside here so that basically he's going to call the save function. But right now, the request.body, if we look at it, come on here, actually has an object that came back with client name, because that's all we had. So he basically, the body parser took and parsed that into an object and provided it back for us. And then when we call new scrum with that, basically that gives us back this other object here, this model object. Come on, come on, come on. That has all these other parameters, like the doc, your save method, and everything. Your object ID, if you notice right now, your object ID is undefined. So we'll go ahead and I'll click this button over here. We'll let it run, and then after it's done inserting that into the database, we get our error back gets called, and so now we're basically going to walk through here, and if I have an error, then throw the error back. I don't have an error, but I do have my client object, so it's going to return that back as JSON. So we'll just go ahead and click it. And then our app should kick back, and we see it here. And if we do this one more time, we'll look at the network, so you can kind of see how that's working there. Do another one here, and I'll 03. Do our save, and now we're going through here again. I'm just going to go ahead and let it run. And if we come back over here, you'll see that we have our post down here. And so what we sent here in the request payload is test client 3. And then our response was we've got a new object back with an ID and an empty array of objects in a version of 0. And then when it switched over to back to the home page, he basically requested all the clients, which gave us back all the clients. So now if we come in here and let's say we want to edit this first guy, you'll see it hit load, so he's grabbing the ID first, and then oh, we got an error in use. What did I do wrong? Oh, I know what happened. We're still in the debugger. So we'll go ahead and we'll just launch that. It'll come back, and then so we have our test client 01 here. I'll put a little smiley face on the end of it, and we'll save that. And then see, he's loading it up again because the update's going to pull that guy up first. So then we'll go ahead and kick it, and then we get into our update method, and you'll notice that we already have our client here already from the previous load. And so now it's basically going to go through. We're going to update the data on it, and then we're going to call save. And then he'll return back the JSON-P object. And if you look over here, this was our get initially. So we did a get. Oh, where's the? This just drives me nuts. Oh, come on. Where's the bring up? I don't see it. And then we did our post here. So this was actually our put back to the database. And so we sent the client with the smiley face on it, and then we got that same thing back. So we're echoing back the object. Then we call clients. We get all three of them back, and now he's got the new smiley face on it. And then if we hit the X button over here, we're going to go hit our delete. And so again, it loads up the object, and then my code pulls in the object, and then he calls delete on it is what happens from the resource. And so then he calls the destroy on it, and it's going to call remove on that object, or on that, and so it'll be gone. And when we get back, you'll see we're down to just 2 guys. And kind of give you an idea of the AngularJS side of this. So this is my data service for talking to the back end. We're just using the resource, ng resource, and basically the default is client/client ID. We define client ID as @ID, so it knows that that's the client ID for the object. And then we tell it, with an update, we want to use the put method. It's a basic ng resource stuff. We're basically just using it right straight out of the box. So we're not doing anything special there. But if we look at like my client new method on the controller, basically we start out with an empty object with client name, and then we basically say we use the resource and say, okay, create me a new resource using that the mock object I have, and then we call save on it. And once that save operation's done, then we basically change our path back to our home page. With the edit, it's a little bit similar, but so the save is pretty much, it's basically scope.client.update, because what we're going to do is I always do like an init method and then call that. We're going to get that client with client ID and our parameter that's on the line. So if we go back over here and I click on this guy and we hit edit, you'll see that the ID is right here. That's not the nicest looking thing in the world, but it works good. You could also, a lot of people will put a unique field in their objects and they'll use that. But I mean, object ID to me is just as good as anything else. So that's the actual client ID, and that's what he's actually using. Where is it? Control tab. Over here. So that comes in on the route params. Controls. Let me. We define the route. Edit client with :ID. So, or basically when we call scrum data.get, and we're passing in the route ID, he's going to basically bring us back that object, and we'll populate the client. And then when the user clicks on the save, then we'll just basically, we have a module that will automatically call update. Yeah?
How are you handling making sure that you resolve correct IDs? So like if you just go into the URL and type whatever you want in there?
You could. Well, what's going to happen is you're going to get nothing back, right?
Right. Well, I guess what I'm asking is how are you, like what code are you calling in Express to handle that case?
Oh, well, so what I'm doing, and this is, let me show you the main controller here. Well, actually, let me show you the main view. So my main view, what I'm doing is I'm actually, we have this ng repeat client and clients, and then I'm actually putting the client ID for every object after edit client,
right,
and after delete client. And so what's going to do with that is it's just going to basically always have it'll link that way.
I guess what I'm asking is, what if say you have one employee that's trying to pass, hey, can you chip in on this particular project? And he copies the link and then pastes it, but doesn't get the whole link or whatever. How are you resolving that?
Oh, well, I'm not doing any of that here.
Okay.
This is very, very basic, but I know what you're saying. We have that problem all the time with IE and webmail.
Well, by default, Mongo is just going to return an all object.
Yeah.
Right.
Matter of fact, if we go up here to the API, what you'll get is failed to load client. So what he'll do is he'll call next, and that's something else I should have kind of went over these. So there are basically at a minimum 3 parameters that will come into every function in your module: your request, your response, and then the next guy in the chain. And think of this as a big pipeline. You can do some processing, and if you do response.send or response.render, res.render or send, you're going to kill the pipeline at that point and return back out. Or you can actually call next here, and that will then call the guy behind you in the queue, and he can do processing and stuff like that. And so one of the things you do, let's say like from authentication, let's say you want to use, how Angular has the cross-site scripting xref header. So as long as you provide a cookie, he's always going to echo that back to you in the header. So you could then add a module that will look at that cookie, and you'd put it high up in the stack. So in your Node.app, you'd put it up here with either after the body parser, but maybe before the static. You'd put it somewhere in here so it's at the beginning of the stack, and then you would check to see if that token showed up, and if not, you could just do a response.write, or send a 404 error back to them, unauthorized, or a 400 unauthorized. But if it's correct, then you just go ahead and do next.
Yeah.
And so
maybe after your talk, I can show you kind of what I was doing and see what you think. Like if I went about it the wrong way.
I mean, like, so this code fragment here I pulled out of the mean example. Matter of fact, let me bring that up. So this is the other example that they have out here. Let's see where
is this project on GitHub?
Now, this express test is not, but I'm gonna send you guys to a better one. It's actually the mean IO. So they actually have a sample where they've done everything. And I call it mean test here, but let me see if I can find it here. I think it's mean.io. Yeah, so it's basically their boilerplate, and it's out on. So if you go to www.mean.io, he basically walks you through. They've got all these different packages, but they also have this sample project. So in this case here, the app project is going to be your server-side app. And they are, again, using Jade for your views. So like your includes, you've got your footer, you've got your header, you've got your index page here. Then your Angular app is actually going to be in the public folder. And so you have your index.html here for your Angular app and your header, and then your JavaScript falls under JS, controllers, and services. And this is kind of what they did here is they actually did like a sample blog sample. And then under app models, they have their article schema where they're like created title, content, and user. And then they added things like how to validate title. Like, the length's got to be greater than 0. Otherwise, give an error back, title can't be blank. And this is where I got the load function from here too. But they also have a user schema here, and it's basically name, email, what their provider is, and they do password hashing in here. So they've got hash password and salt, and so they'll actually they have a method called make salt. So it'll go down here and in the schema, if I can find it here. Here's their make salt. They just return back a random number based off of the date, and then they've got their encrypt password where they're using a crypto package to create the HMAC. And then in their controllers here, they've got their article controller, which basically has the load, the create, kind of like what we had in our Scrum thing. And then they also have their user controller that does all their authentication. But this guy also has in it, they actually bring in Passport, which gives you access to things like OAuth for Twitter, for Facebook, for GitHub, and go through and gives you that. So it's a lot more in detail, and they actually do a lot better handling of everything. And they also make it a lot more modular, but it may be a little bit harder for you to follow because, like, they have this config directory here, and so they've got a routes config, which basically says, okay, here's all my user routes, and they bring in their controllers users, and they sign those up, and then they set their API, and see, like, they'll do auth Facebook, and then they've got their Passport authenticate via Facebook, and then when you're done, call users.signin when you're done. So this gets you a much better step into it. And then Express, they've got all their strategies here for Twitter, local, GitHub. And then this is their basic config here, and this is where I was missing. I couldn't figure out why my parsing wasn't working. It's because I left out the body parser, and I was like, it said it went through, but I was getting nothing back. And then they've got their config, and they basically set up all their different config environments. So if you go under all.js, you can see all your environment for your root path, and then they've got like their production environment with what their Facebook and app secret and IDs are and everything. So you can set that up, and then they have one for development if you're doing development. So this actually gives you a good example of how to load configuration based on your development environment. And then again, like I said, their views are all Jade based. And then that give you a good idea how to dig into it.
Yeah, thanks. I didn't mean to derail you.
No, you didn't derail me at all. I like questions. Actually, I was pretty much at the end of that. I did have some other resources, so we went through that first one, but this is the resource slide. This is pretty much, I had that all up there before, but wrong side. There we go. Node.js.org. You can find out everything you want to know about Node.js there. MongoDB.org. And like I said, if the MongoDB training, if you really want to get into Node.js and using Mongo, I suggest you take that. It'll be a good primer for you. MongoosejS.com is going to basically, there's a whole bunch of stuff on Mongoose when you get into it, really. So yeah, I've shown you the basic, but you actually get into the docs, and they've got basically validation code that you can add to your models, and it's all around your Mongoose. You define the model for your app, and it handles the scaffolding for you. But then it's actually easy enough for you to add functionality to it for your own custom validation, your own custom middleware. So like if you can put in your own custom middleware and do the same thing that you're doing in Express with the next method. So if you want to do validation, they provide, you can do plugins for stuff. Like last modified plugin here, where it'll basically set the last modified time on every object. And then their API docs, which it's pretty simple stuff from once you get into it. It's not very hard. It's like Express and everything else. It's pretty straightforward, and they pretty much kind of kept that same thing with that. ExpressJS.com is the Express site. Their reference, they basically go through here and they'll show you all your different application requests and then give you samples. They also have their guide here, which kind of walks you through getting started and how to get set up. And then they actually see here on applications, who uses Express. Hey, you guys are in the same world as MySpace now.
Airbnb uses Node.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that are jumping on the Node bandwagon, and tell you the truth,
So
it's fair.
it's not Ruby anymore? I thought it was.
Who?
They moved everything to Node?
Well, I didn't say 100% Node.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then you've got Node.js site. Again, this will get you started. They get their download, their docs. It's pretty simple. Same way with MongoDB. They've got full documentation online. They also, you get your JavaScript docs here for the native client. And so they've got their driver and that. They also give you links back to Mongoose. You kind of already looked at Mongoose. Let's see, AngularJS, everybody knows where that's at. We're still at 1.2.0 RC3. That was let me get out of that. And then Bower, if you're, again, Bower, think of Bower more for your Angular app, to pull in libraries for your Angular app. And the Node Package Manager for your Node app. And then there is Generator Express that will do generation for you. There's also the Express client interface, command line interface, that right out of the box Express will do some basic stuff for you. And then you've got Mean.io, which will basically, they're doing their best to basically give you the entire stack on top of Node with Angular and Mongoose and everything. And I would keep an eye out on the Yeoman site. So if we get out here to, let's see, Yeoman.io. And, look at community generators. This usually is updated, And so like if we're looking for Express, there is an Angular Express one, and I tried that. It kept dying on me. There is a Node Express one, an Express app. You'll just have to kind of play with them. Let's see what we have
It looks
here.
like Mean.io is got hot on.
Yeah, well, let's look for mean here. Let's see. You're right. There it is, generated for a mean stack. And there's mean stack. And so there are some, about 16 hours ago. See, and the mean stack was 0 with one fork. So there's 32 here. So this might be worth taking a look at. Generator mean stack. It's based on generator Angular, which means that they started off with that, and who knows. So let's try it. What the hell? So let's...
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, not much. Okay. Make sample 2. And then npm. Oh. What was it? Mean stack? Generator mean stack. Okay. Okay, so see what we get here. So do you want to deploy it to Heroku? No. Okay, he's getting stuff for you now.
I don't need to know anything else.
So far, so good.
Yep. Well, he's compiling tests and stuff. So we have an app, app.js, we have public, we have route. So it looks like it generated everything like the mean. Let's go take a look here. So that should be in here, and let's look at sample 2. So you've got a server.js, which it looks like it'll be your, here, let's file, open directory, web storm project, sample 2. So yeah, you've got your server.js here, which basically just requires .app. So that means everything in the app directory. And then, so he's,
.app.js.
yeah, .app.js, yeah, you're right. This guy here, excuse me. So that he's bringing in express routes and path, and then it looks like he's doing environments, more routes on top of that. So under your routes, you got your index.js, so he comes up with your title. So it looks like the same thing that we kind of went over without the whole client side. So this guy here is, so they actually did put your app.js stuff in the root here. So you've got your app directory. Now the question would be, what happens if I open up a terminal and say grunt server? Will it launch and give me an app? Holy hell, it does.
I bet they even have tests.
I bet you they do. So grunt test. Yep. There we go. There was karma. That was quick and fast. So it looks like generator mean might be the way to go. Okay, so who wants to do next month's presentation and show us how to run around a generator mean?
I think we've got a volunteer.
All right. Any other questions, guys?
That's great.
Well, thank you for putting up with my befuddled. Okay. I guess we'll stop
Do you
this.
find it faster